this is Nick from Man from Soul, and this is part of the Glitch.cool takeover of Wilg's YouTube channel. For my portion of the takeover, I'm going to be showing how to make squishy bass noises and various techniques to get different types of squish. So let's get right into it. So the first squishy bass I want to show you is more or less reminiscent of the original TB303 acid bass line. For those of you who do not know what the TB303 is, it was a bassline synthesizer released by Roland 4,000 years ago. And basically, it was designed to accompany guitar players and provide a bass line for them so they could play to. But what ended up happening was that not a lot of guitar players bought it, but a lot of people started buying it to make techno with at the time, because they realized if you crank the resonance and move it around and put a nice filter envelope on it, it makes a really sweet sound. So we're not going to recreate a TB303 sound in here exactly, but we're going to take what makes it squishy and kind of explore that a little in here. So let's get a synth in here. So we have Citrus. That's the synth I'm going to use. Nice sine wave patch. Let's we're gonna sort of recreate a TB303 sound in here. So the acid sound, as it were. So the whole thing, like I said, with it is that it has resonance moving around. That's kind of the big thing here. So I'm just gonna put this down to like a nice bass tone. Filter. So we'll just use the default low pass filter. We're gonna crank that resonance, and we need to give the filter an envelope here. So let's draw one in. Okay, so that's a pretty good start. And so the more it goes over the spectrum with this resonance, the kind of in some ways the squishier it sounds. So let's draw a quick sequence here. Okay, so we have a simple TB303 sequence, little acid bass line. So let's here assign the cutoff to the mod X. I don't want it to go down all the way because if it's too low, it just sounds bad. So let's automate that cutoff. Okay, so not bad. It's a little kind of squishy, drippy sounding. So let's give it a little bit of delay. Delay is one of the secrets to getting squishiness. So we're gonna set the time down to 1. Turn the input and level down a little. Maybe 3. You could use the square wave instead of a saw as well if you would like. It's up to you. But yeah, let's. So that's kind of like obviously this doesn't sound exactly like the original 303 acid line. Like there's ways to get it closer and closer, but that's not what we're after today. But you can hear a bit of that with that resonance moving around with the delay. You get that kind of drippy, squishy kind of texture sounding bass. So let's find a way to turn this a little squishier, and so we're going to deviate even more from the traditional 303 sound, but so what? So let's just frequency modulate it a little. So if anything, that's actually sounding a bit more metallic now, which is cool. Squishy and metallic seem to go well together sometimes. So let's feed filter 1 into the next filter. And for this filter, we're actually going to use the phaser filter. the resonance is not quite the same as like a normal resonance because it's a phaser, so it's controlling a different parameter. And so are these various filter modes. So let's just get something a little funky here. Okay, so yeah, so phasers also add squish to stuff. So that's kind of non-neuro type of bass. Is just a simple. You can kind of apply this well to just about anything. So if you're trying to make a synthy kind of bass that has some squish to it, you're not trying to get into like neuro territory. This is some kind of, these three things can help you out a bit. Resonant filter movement, delay, and phasers. Alright, so let's make a more neuro bass type thing this time. We're gonna make it pretty squishy. So let's start by actually building a simple neuro bass, and we'll show you how to make it squishy. Alright, so we have a simple neuro bass that I just built here. This is what it sounds like. I'll show you how I made it. So really simple, nothing too fancy. What this really is a sine wave with some added harmonics over the top, so spread about randomly, being frequency modulated by another sine wave, roughly one octave above it. I detuned it slightly with some more harmonics spread about. That is being fed through a bandpass, and I'm automating its position in the spectrum. That's being smashed into a multiband compressor called Maximus that I use. Then it's going through 2 peaks and 2 notches. Those are being moved around. And then another compressor, and then I'm just EQing it down a little. This is incredibly basic and plain. I wouldn't necessarily use this bass directly as is in a track. I'm just using it as an example. But yeah, let's make it squishy. So as it is, it sounds kind of metallic and kind of cool, but that's not what we're going for here. We want that squish. So let's put a Valhalla frequency echo on it. This is a free plugin. I've shown it off in a previous video of mine on my channel if you check it out. So we're gonna keep the actually, instead of here, so here's the thing, you can do it with both this plugin and you can also do it with where is it? They both work just fine. I'll do it first with this one, then I'll quickly show you how to do it with the other one. So I'm going to put the wet dry maybe to about 70%. Feedback, we also want that up to 70%, but we want to turn the delay down to 0 milliseconds. I like the sound that you get out of this one a tad better than the Valhalla frequency echo, because the Valhalla frequency echo, the delay only goes down to 0.1 or 0.01 milliseconds, not 0, and so to me it makes a little bit of a difference. But as it is, oh here, before we do that, let's show a limiter on here so we don't blow everything up. Okay, so here's what it sounds like with this on so far. So it sounds kind of bad, it sounds like weaker than it did before actually, but if we turn the shift just a little. So pretty cool. We immediately get some shifting, some squishiness going on to it. And fundamentally, this is kind of the same thing that was going on, like when you use like a phaser or a bunch of really tight delay or whatever. You're basically causing destructive interference in such a way that sounds squishy. I don't know exactly why it does. It just does. So So it works. It sounds a little better with this plugin in my opinion. But the thing is, the range of like kind of usable squishiness is really tiny here. It's like about here to maybe here, and so it's kind of hard to automate that without setting up an extra controller with custom parameters. So I'm just gonna replace it with the Valhalla frequency echo. We're gonna turn it to mostly wet again. Delay is down as far as it'll go, and the thing is, the range that the shift goes on this is a lot more forgiving for like the type of squishy sound we want. So let's stick the feedback up to like 70 or so. Yeah, the high cut, I don't quite know why it does that. I think it's like some kind of self-resonating filter or something. Brings in that sine wave. It's kind of... Anyway, so I just turned that all the way up to avoid that. You can leave that where it is. And so let's... So let's automate that around. Okay, so here it's a little bit more squishy. Whoops. Weird. I don't quite know why it's doing that, but anyway, that resonating sine wave that sticks around. Bizarre. But anyway, so let's quickly record this. So normalize that. So now we're going to stick it in a granular synth. And so if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm really big on resampling things over and over again in a granulizer. And I'm not go away. I'm not the first person to do that. I'm definitely not the first person to do this thing. Resampling things with granulizers or granular synths is a really, really common technique. Let's put that back on C5. Okay. So and then so we gotta turn on loop mode, and then let's just make automation clips for the attack, hold, grain spacing, and wave spacing. And if you've never seen FL Studio's granular engine, default granular engine, basically the reason I like using it for resampling rather than a lot of other engines is because it plays every grain in the specific order, and it doesn't skip around, so you get a continuity that you don't get with others. I go into detail on this on my basic glitch sound design tutorial. You can check out if you're so inclined. But yeah, so let's pump this into the mixer, and I like to add a little bit of boost with the wave shaper. Just give it some oomph, a little bit of grit. Also because the default output's kind of quiet for some reason. So yeah, let's mangle this thing up. Okay, so we resampled it. It sounds a little something like this. So, not too bad. This time let's use a M frequency shifter. And so we'll just have to be a little careful when we do this shift, that we don't go too far into one of the extremes, because if you do, it just kind of, it sends it out of the range and you don't get squishy, you just get a sharp, harsh noise at that point. Delay down to 0, feedback up. Can play with the width, maybe that'll be cool, but let's see, so shift. By the way, both this and Valhalla Frequency Echo are free online, on the internet. So again, we want to keep this kind of in like the middle ranges. Okay, so what it sounds like. Awesome. So you can keep resampling that over and over, and you can keep adding frequency shifters to it. if you want. That's one way to get valid squish. As you see, we already have it pretty dang squishy as it is. So let's resample this again, but I'm going to show you another technique besides just frequency shifting. So let's record this. Okay, so those of you who have seen my previous videos know that I really like to resample things into Harmor. So let's dump this into Harmor. So I had that on a preset called Resynthesizer, but sweet. So let's let's make a quick MIDI note here. 2 bars. Let's give a little bit of slide notes too, just because they're cool. Let's put some scatter about randomly. Okay, let's let's just give this like a little bit of distortion, a little bit of multiband compression, just get it oomph in a little. Okay, so it sounds cool as it is, but we haven't really done anything exciting to it. What I like to do to add squish is we're going to go again use a phaser. We used one earlier to show that you can get squishy stuff. It's fun to use multiple different squishy techniques together to maximize squish. So the thing we're going to be automating. So with this phaser, there's a ton of different things you can automate. I like to leave the speed as default, or it doesn't really matter. Maybe you can always speed it up a bit to increase like the rate of squish for lack of a better term. I'm really not using very scientific terms this time around, but you can also turn the speed to 0 and then automate this offset, and this offset controls the position in the spectrum of the phaser, and so you can manually control where it's phasing, but it's not really necessary for this demo. What I am going to automate though is this width tool, or this width control. There's a sweet spot in like the lower portion of this control where like it's, because you're changing the width around, so where it's like starting off at a certain width and it kind of like shifts to another one where it just sounds really big and impactful. It's kind of hard to explain, so let me just kind of put this around here and I'll show you. So here's what it sounds like without that. Actually, go over here. Let's just actually do this. This is what it sounds like without that. Now when we turn the phaser back on. So yeah, that adds some squishiness to it. We can turn the speed off and then we'll automate this around, see if that helps. And we can also, if you go a little higher, you get that kind of classic phaser sound here also. Let's while we're reusing old techniques, let's throw a quick delay on here. Let's put that down to like 1. Stereo offset, let's give it a good amount of stereo offset. Where's let's see, compression? Okay, good, we want compression last in the mix. Let's put the distortion after the delay. Pretty neat. You can play around all sorts of different stuff. We can turn on some unison here. Okay, so that's a pretty neat technique right there to make some more squishy bass noises. Okay, So let's go over one more technique for squishy bass. So I'm going to show you another trick in Harmor here. So let's bring up a default patch, or ye old saw wave. So for this, we're going to really abuse the crap out of our custom filter resonances here. So we're going to use the noise resonance. I find this tends to work better when we put this on a square wave. Let's pitch this down, but we might change that later. I'm just going to shove it 2 octaves lower. So let's do a, we want a band pass. We want a decent width here. So what we're going to do, we're going to crank that resonance up, bring the width down a little. So the way that the filters inside Harmor work is that they're not actually doing linear phase distortion, or whatever it's called, that filters normally do, where they receive audio and it's actually processing the audio itself. Everything within Harmor exists purely in the abstract realm of mathematics until it goes to the effects section. And so that means that you can get a lot of really crazy filters that wouldn't really work in a classical sense. However, because here it's just a matter of manipulating numbers, and by numbers I mean basically the frequency and the phase of a bajillion harmonics. I think Harmor can do over 500. I forget the number, but so it allows you to, you're not really filtering audio, you're manipulating a bunch of different sine functions. And so they have all sorts of crazy algorithms built into the filters, both within the filters themselves as well as their weird resonances. And you can make your own custom resonances and all that kind of fun stuff. So one of them I like is the noise, and it's basically at the corner frequency or cutoff frequency of your filter. It has noise, for lack of a better term. It's to me it seems like it's a kind of pseudo-random distribution of amplitude and frequency of everything within the area defined by the resonance. So if we let's have a note playing here. Let's move this around. So the lower we go, it's not there, but the higher you go, you can hear the character changing. Yeah, the character changes as we move it around. Let's move the width of the different sections being manipulated is controlled by this width, so we want that relatively low. So the trick is we don't want to be getting all this kind of like low stuff too much in there, but we also don't want the too much of the high stuff peeking through. So you can use a band pass, you can use a low pass, and followed by a high pass. It's kind of up to you. But the trick is to use this noise kind of resonance to get this kind of watery, chippy sound, and you can manipulate it however you want. Now, so that in itself is not a bass, that's just like a texture noise. So I'm going to show you what can happen if you combine it with a bass. So let's pull up Patcher. And so I have a default patch that I use already, wet. Okay, so I'm going to make a quick little patch here, or a quick little 2-bar sound with this. Okay, so this is what this patch that I've pre-made sounds like. So it's a lot more subtle than other basses that I've shown, but it sounds really like wet and liquidy. And the reason for that is because within this Harmor, half of it is a straight up sine wave, and the other half that is really quiet because the mix is mostly going to this sine wave, is that kind of wet noise that I showed you how to make. Yeah, and so basically the two are being layered, and then I'm going through a typical sine compression process, and then I'm throwing in some delay and reverb at the end. So quick thing about sine compression, if you don't know what it is, It's the idea that if you take a sine wave and you compress the crap out of it while saturating it a little, and then run various band passes and notches and peaks over it over and over again, kind of like the last patch I showed you, you eventually get this kind of like crazy Neuro bass. That's not false. I use that technique. However, I don't really like the name sine compression. I don't think sine compression is a very good name because it doesn't really, the compression isn't necessarily so much like where the fun part is happening. It's not where like the characteristic sound is. It's like this it's the saturation, and it's a combination of the saturation and the filters moving around that causes the characteristic sound of what in the Neuro world is known as sine compression. So that's just me being a little pedantic about over semantics. I don't usually just have like a straight up sine and go through that process. I usually FM some kind of waveform around and do it that way because I can get much more interesting results. In this one, we have the, going to A. Yeah, so within Harmor, the way that you control like the waveform is with this graph. Each one of these squares represents, or these columns represents a, I guess a harmonic for lack of a better term. Yeah, I guess it's basically a harmonic. And so we only have this first one enabled, so I'm just gonna bring up the next couple few just so we get a bit more stuff. Yeah, let's get a little bit of unison. Ooh, that weird squeak, I didn't like that. Anyway, so this is a really subtle bass, but it sounds really liquidy because we are layering those things together. As far as the controls here, it's the simple bandpass, peak 1, peak 2, notch 1, notch 2 that I normally do, or I showed you in the last squishy patch. But then this chirp control is controlling the resonance on the wet part. So you see that moving around. And so you can control this resonance. You can straight up just control the volume of this side of it. But yeah, that's another way to get squishy bass noises. Here's the sound again one last time. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more technique for making squishy basses. This one's going to be the easiest of them all. Basically, you take a bass and then you throw a recording of water or some other type of squishy sound on top of it. This isn't too fundamentally different from the last patch, where we had that Harmor wet noise stuff going over that sine compression. This is fundamentally similar. We have a Reese bass coming out of this citrus, and inside this Harmor I have a sampled clip of audio of some water playing. I got it from the internet somewhere. And so it sounds kind of like this. Yeah, and so without the water, it sounds like this. But when we put the recording of the water on top, so this one sounds a bit more crispy than squishy, but the idea is pretty similar. The thing is, I have this water is being kind of high passed because it's if you have too much of the lower stuff going in there, it's going to interfere too much with the bass stuff here. So whatever you're layering, you have to make sure that they're quasi-compatible and they're not going to be interfering with each other too much, because you want them to go through similar processing and come out at the end sounding as a cohesive sound rather than just kind of two sounds smushed together, which they ultimately are. So yeah, that's it's about as simple as that. Without the bass, the water sounds kind of like this. So as you can hear, it sounds a bit more metallic and crispy than a normal sounding water splash recording, but the idea is there, and that is another technique you can use to make squishy bass noises.